Well, what are the consequences of market power? We've got four of them listed here. Firstly, market power leads to higher prices. This one shouldn't be a surprise. In fact, that was exactly how we defined market power, the ability to raise prices while still keeping customers. Number two, market power leads to an inefficiently smaller quantity. We saw that in the last pair of graphs, but sometimes that can feel like it's not that big a deal. In fact, this is one of the most serious consequences of market power. Now, it doesn't always feel like having a lower quantity of something that firms are producing is necessarily bad. I mean, if there's a couple fewer cell phones out there or a couple fewer hamburgers, that doesn't seem like the end of the world, but there's lots of things where when we miss out on them, we're genuinely worse off as a society. And there's a video that I've linked underneath this video on insulin rationing, which is an example of a situation where lower quantity has very, very serious consequences. Third one, market power leads to larger economic profits. This is pretty natural by design. In fact, firms raise prices not just randomly, they raise prices precisely because they want to increase their profits. And number four, businesses that have market power can keep on going even if they're not operating particularly efficiently. A really good example of this is AT&T. For years, AT&T was just the phone company. If you said the phone company, you were referring exactly to AT&T. And leading up to the 1980s, when we eventually solved this problem, we'll talk about that in a few minutes here, AT&T had been having increasingly higher and higher prices, had essentially no innovation. AT&T was in no hurry to introduce, for example, cellular technology into the market because it was making such a large profit with landlines. Similarly, it had no incentive to introduce new telephones for people. Instead, we just had the old rotary dial-up telephones because, well, there was no particular reason for AT&T to sell you anything else when people would continue leasing these phones from the company for several dollars a month. AT&T could make lots and lots of money on this without technology progressing in any way. Now, for an economist, we look at these, we're saying, look, number one, number three, those aren't inherently bad. Higher prices aren't inherently bad. Larger economic profits are also not inherently bad. It's the second and fourth that are really bad. The second one is essentially the deadweight loss point, that with lower quantities we get less economic surplus. The fourth one is one that doesn't show up quite as easily on graphs, but certainly that lack of innovation that can sometimes be associated with firms with high market power can be a pretty serious problem for society.